What happens when a black woman is seen as suspicious just for sitting still? And what if her husband is a 4-star general? She had 10 unread emails, 2 missed calls, and 1 long breath left in her. Danielle Prescott needed a moment, not because she was overwhelmed, not because the day had worn her down, but because this was the only part of the day that was truly hers. It was just after 2 p.m. in Carmel, Indiana, a quiet suburb with well-kept lawns, well-meaning smiles, and well-drawn boundaries, the kind that didn't need to be posted on signs. You just knew Danielle sat alone under a sycamore tree in Flowing Park. Her laptop bag beside her, her tablet still warm from a Zoom meeting she had wrapped up in the car. She wore a pressed blouse, navy slacks, low heels, and a ponytail that had fought humidity all morning. Everything about her said capable, calm, composed. She wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary, just sitting, thinking, letting the sun filter through the trees and land on her face. She wasn't from that exact neighborhood, but she wasn't far either. 20 minutes away, executive director of a regional clinic, married, mother of 2, the kind of person who returned shopping carts and answered emails on weekends. She was planning to head home soon, just needed a minute to decompress before traffic and maybe finish the smoothie she'd picked up earlier. No loud music, no phone call, just a woman on a bench catching her breath. A silver SUV passed by slowly in the background. Danielle glanced up briefly, but didn't think much of it. People came and went in parks all the time, but what she didn't see was the driver, a woman, mid-50s, sitting on the phone, parked at the end of the curb, watching. Inside the SUV, she muttered, "I don't know, she's just been sitting there. She looks like she doesn't belong." Could be nothing, but still. Then she added, "She keeps looking around like she's watching the houses or something." The 911 dispatcher answered flatly, "Okay, ma'am, we'll send someone to check it out." Back at the bench, Danielle was skimming through notes for tomorrow's board meeting. She made a small correction with her finger on the tablet screen inside, thinking about how she could get the new pediatric wing funded by the end of Q3. That's when a patrol car pulled into the lot, then a second one followed. 2 officers stepped out, one adjusted his belt, the other squinted in her direction. Danielle looked up briefly, expecting maybe a friendly wave or a nod, but they didn't smile, they didn't wave. They walked directly toward her like they had a purpose, one hand near the holster, the other gripping a radio. Danielle blinked. She wasn't nervous, not yet, more confused than anything. "Afternoon, ma'am," the taller officer said. "Hi," Danielle replied, polite but cautious. "Is something wrong? Can we ask what you're doing here today?" he asked, not conversational, controlled. She frowned slightly, sat up straighter. "I was just sitting here finishing up some work before heading home." "Why?" The second officer glanced at her bag. "You live around here?" "I live about 20 minutes from here." "Yes, is there a problem?" The taller one stepped forward. "We got a call about a suspicious person in the area. You match the description." Danielle looked around the empty park. "Sitting on a bench in broad daylight is suspicious now." "Just doing our job," he said, not answering the question. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't panic, she simply said, "I'm not doing anything illegal." The shorter officer gave a tight smile. "Ma'am, do you have identification on you?" She reached slowly toward her bag. "Yes, it's in his." "Stop," the taller one snapped. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Danielle froze. Her hand, halfway to the bag, hovered like it didn't know what it had done wrong. "I was just reaching for my wallet," she said. "Calm, careful, stand up, please," the officer said. "What? Why?" "Ma'am, stand up." Danielle looked around the park, still quiet, still sunny, still empty, but somehow all of it felt tighter now, closer. But just as she rose to her feet, something in the air shifted, not because she posed a threat, but because someone had already decided she was one. Danielle stood up slowly, keeping her hands visible, just as she'd been taught to do, not in any training, but in life. The officer motioned toward her with a slight flick of the wrist. "Turn around." She blinked. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You're not being arrested," he said, stepping behind her, "just being detained while we figure this out." She turned her head, confused. "Figure what out?" Neither answered. The taller one reached out, clicked the cuffs tight around her wrists, one, then the other. The cold metal clamped down hard. A group of teens across the park stopped mid-step. A jogger slowed, eyes locked on the scene. A mother called her child back from the playground, glancing over her shoulder more than once. Danielle's bag, tablet, and half-finished smoothie sat on the bench like she'd never existed. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice stayed even. "Officers, this is a mistake. I work in healthcare. I can show you my credentials. There's absolutely no reason for you or acting suspicious." One of them cut her off, voice low, but curt. "That's enough." She looked at both of them, sitting quietly and minding my business is suspicious now. He didn't answer. The silence said enough. She inhaled deeply, lips tight. "I'd like to make a phone call." The shorter officer exchanged a glance with the taller one, who shrugged. "Go ahead, speaker," he added, tapping his ear as if the air had ears. Danielle nodded and shifted her hands, still cuffed, to reach into her back pocket. With some effort, she pulled out her phone, unlocked it with her voice, and Pressed a single contact, it rang once, then a voice answered, low, controlled, deep with age and weight. Danielle, her breath hitched just slightly. Hey, she paused. I need you to stay calm. There was a beat of silence, then, where are you? Flowingwell Park, she said. They've detained me. I was sitting on a bench and someone called the police. They say I was suspicious. A pause. Then, are you hurt? No, just embarrassed. The officer shifted uncomfortably. I'm coming. The voice said. Wait, she said quickly, before you. But he had already continued. Put me on speaker. Danielle glanced up at the officer. He wants to be on speaker. The taller one nodded reluctantly. She pressed the button. This is General Julius Prescott, United States Army. The voice echoed loud and firm through the phone. You are currently detaining my wife without cause. I'm on my way now and this call is being recorded. I suggest you notify your supervisor immediately. The two officers froze. The shorter one lowered his radio mic from his mouth. I'll be there in 15 minutes. General Prescott continued. You will not move her, you will not touch her again, and you will not speak to her without me present. Click. The line went dead. Danielle stared at the officers. One of them cleared his throat. You should have said who you were married to. She blinked at him like he had just said something deeply stupid. And why should that matter? Neither had an answer, because there wasn't one. Minutes passed slowly. One of the officers kept pacing, the other checked his radio, muttered something about confirming the ID, about trying to de-escalate. The energy had changed. What started as casual control now smelled like panic, because while Danielle didn't raise her voice, the man on the other end of the phone didn't have to. And they both knew things were about to get serious, but what none of them knew was that someone had been recording, and that video would hit the internet before the general ever arrived. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet Danielle liked. It was heavy, the kind where silence has a pulse, where nothing is being said, but everything is being heard. She was still standing, still cuffed, her wrists ached, but her pride hurt worse, not because she'd done something wrong, but because now everyone thought she had. The jogger had circled back. He was filming now at a distance. The teenagers were closer, one whispering, what did she even do? Another shook her head and muttered, they always do this. Danielle kept her eyes forward still, shoulders square. The taller cop was pacing again. The shorter one had stepped away, pretending to check something on his phone. She could tell they were nervous now, the kind of nervous that shows up when someone realizes they've gone too far and can't rewind. You can sit if you want, the tall one said suddenly. Softer this time. Danielle looked at him like he hadn't just slapped her wrists with metal. 10 minutes ago. No, thank you, he nodded, but it felt more like surrender than respect. Across the small parking lot, a black sedan slowed, not the general, just another bystander. A woman leaned out of the passenger side and snapped a photo. Danielle heard the click. The car drove off without a word. The park had changed. 10 minutes ago, it was a quiet spot for lunch or a stroll. Now it was a story waiting to happen. Whispers, footage, online guesses. A teenager approached cautiously, phone in hand. Maybe 17, soft brown curls, hoodie half-zipped. Ma'am, she asked, is it okay if I ask what happened? Did you? Danielle interrupted gently. I sat on a bench. The girl blinked. That's it. The girl looked at the officers. Y'all arrested her for sitting. She's not under arrest, the shorter one said quickly. She's being detained. The girl scoffed. Yeah, same difference to everybody watching. She turned around and muttered into her phone camera. Cops just cuffed a woman in Carmel for sitting under a tree. They said someone called her in. She wasn't doing anything. Danielle closed her eyes for a second. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because she knew what was coming, and still the general hadn't arrived. Then came the third squad car. Not for her, not directly. It was the watch commander, Lieutenant Harris. Stocky frame, gray at the temples, gold badge on his chest. He stepped out, surveyed the scene, and walked straight up to the officers. No smile, no greeting. What's going on? The taller one spoke first. We got a call about a suspicious individual. Matched the description. Harris squinted. What description? Black woman sitting on a bench near the houses. Looking around, Harris turned toward Danielle. He scanned her from head to toe. Professional, polished, standing still with cuffs on her wrists and quiet fire in her eyes. He turned back and that called for handcuffs. She reached toward her bag. The officer explained. Could have been a weapon. Did she threaten you? No, but did she refuse to give ID? She tried, but did she raise her voice, curse at you, physically resist? No, sir, but take the cuffs off? The officer hesitated. I said, take them off, with stiff fingers. The taller officer moved behind Danielle and clicked the cuffs open. She rotated her wrists slightly, red lines visible against her skin. She didn't flinch. Miss Prescott, Lieutenant Harris said, his tone now carefully formal. I apologize for the situation. I'll be filing an incident report and reviewing the call myself. Danielle looked him in the eye. Lieutenant, my husband is on his way. He's not going to be quiet about this. He nodded slowly. I wouldn't expect him to be. She folded her arms, standing her ground. I want everything on record. It will be. But she didn't have to say it again, because just then, a black SUV rolled to the curb and the man Inside was already opening the door when the door to the SUV opened. Time didn't stop, but it slowed enough for everyone to notice. General Julius Prescott stepped out, 6 feet tall, close-shaved head, sharp jawline, and a uniform that didn't wrinkle even when the wind blew. His ribbons lined his chest in 3 neat rows, 4 stars sat on his shoulder. His walk was measured, deliberate, the kind that made people clear the path without being asked. The teens across the park fell silent, phones dropped a few inches. Even the jogger, still pretending to stretch near the trail sign, stood up straighter. Danielle didn't blink. She'd seen that walk hundreds of times in ceremonies in airports, in their hallway at home, but now it wasn't just her husband, it was the full weight of his name. He walked straight toward her, not rushing, not angry, just focused. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," Danielle replied. He looked down at her wrists. "They cuffed you?" She nodded once. "For sitting under a tree." He turned, looked straight at Lieutenant Harris. "Who's in charge here?" Harris stepped forward. "I am, sir." Prescott looked him in the eye. "You have ID on this man?" He pointed at the officer who'd placed the cuffs. "I do," Harris said. "Good. I'm going to need everything: bodycam footage, radio logs, call records. I'll be requesting it formally through our JAG liaison." "Yes, sir," Harris said barely above a whisper. The officers, the ones who'd cuffed Danielle, now stood several feet back, eyes on the ground, arms crossed like schoolboys in trouble. General Prescott turned back to Danielle. "You have your things?" She gestured to the bench, tablet, bag. They didn't touch it. He retrieved them for her, not because she needed help, but because he wanted to. He handed them over gently, one hand brushing hers. Then he turned back to the officers. "My wife is a civilian. She broke no law. She posed no threat. The only thing she did was sit down in the wrong zip code." Nobody spoke. "Let me be clear," Prescott continued, his voice cutting through the air. "You don't get to treat people like this. Not her, not anyone. If her last name wasn't mine, she'd still be cuffed right now." He let that sit. "I've spent 30 years serving a country that still allows this garbage to happen in the middle of a public park at 2 p.m., he said, eyes locked on the 2 patrolmen. "You should be ashamed." Lieutenant Harris cleared his throat. "Sir, I assure you this is being taken seriously." Prescott shook his head. "Serious is too late. This was basic judgment, basic respect. You either have it or you don't." He turned to Danielle. "Ready to go?" She nodded. They walked to the SUV in silence. Phones were still rolling, eyes were still wide. No one stopped them. Before he got into the driver's seat, General Prescott paused and looked back one last time. "To the woman who called us in," he said, scanning the nearby houses, "I hope you enjoyed the show, because now the country is about to hear what your fear looks like." And then he got in. The SUV pulled off slow, almost casual, like he wanted them to remember every second. But while they drove home, another vehicle arrived, not one with sirens, but with a microphone, and they weren't asking for statements, they already had the story. The news van didn't need an invitation. It pulled into the lot like it belonged there. The reporter stepped out with her cameraman already rolling, catching what little remained of the scene, the officers regrouping near their cars, Lieutenant Harris making a call, and the bystanders still whispering in clusters. But the real story that was already out: the teenager who filmed it had posted the video with the caption, "She sat, they cuffed." Then her husband showed up, a 4-star general. This is America. By the time the Prescotts pulled into their driveway, it had been viewed over 300,000 times. Danielle sat quietly in the passenger seat, rubbing her wrists. The red marks were fading, but not fast enough. Julius glanced at her but didn't say anything right away. He knew better than to offer comfort before she was ready to receive it. She finally spoke. "I wasn't scared. I was angry, then embarrassed, but now." She shook her head. "Now I'm tired." He nodded. "I still on the road. You don't have to explain that to me." Danielle took out her phone. Dozens of texts, missed calls, group chats blowing up. Her sister had already seen the clip, so had a board member from her job. It was spreading, not because she was someone important, but because people recognized the scene in the face, the cuffs, the silence, the shrug. They'd seen it before too, many times, but this one hit different. The news anchor was already reporting it live by the 5 o'clock broadcast. In a developing story out of Carmel, Indiana, a black woman was briefly detained by police officers this afternoon in what is now being described as a case of mistaken suspicion. The woman's husband, a high-ranking U.S. Army official, arrived on the scene and challenged the officer's conduct. The incident, which was caught on video by a bystander, has since gone viral. They showed the footage: Danielle standing still, the cuffs being placed, the calm in her voice, the crack in the officer's tone when she mentioned who her husband was. Then the general's arrival, tall, composed, commanding, not yelling, just being. The clip cut to a legal analyst. "People often talk about what would have happened if there wasn't a camera, but this time we saw what happened when there was. It's not just about race, it's about assumptions, it's about power, and it's about who gets the benefit of the doubt." Within hours, hashtags started trending. Hashtag #SatBlackSH Danielle Prescott. "How this is why we film." Danielle's phone rang. This time it was her clinic's PR director. "I'm so sorry, Danielle," she said. "We're behind you. Do you want us to make a statement?" Danielle thought about it, thought about all the women who'd been cuffed, questioned, shamed, without husbands in uniform, without an audience, without a camera. She didn't want to become a symbol, but maybe she already had. I'm not sure yet, she said, but if I speak, I'm not holding back. The woman on the other end paused, then said softly, we'll be ready back in the neighborhood. Lieutenant Harris was watching the clip on his own phone, jaw tight. He knew this wasn't going away. He also knew the two officers under him had crossed a line they couldn't walk back. He made 2 calls that evening, one to internal affairs, the other to his captain. Neither conversation was short, but while they handled damage control, Danielle sat at her dining room table drafting something she hadn't written in years, a statement for the public from her own voice on her own terms. By the next morning, the video had passed 3.1 million views. It wasn't just the footage, it was the tone, the contrast, the image of a calm, cuffed black woman on a park bench and a 4-star general stepping out of an SUV, not to shout, not to threaten, but to expose. Major news outlets picked it up. Black woman detained in park, husband, a U.S. Army general, demands accountability. Wrong zip code, wrong time. Viral video sparks outrage in Carmel. General Prescott's calm fury, a lesson in power, race, and public shame. Danielle watched the coverage like someone watching a story they'd heard before, except this time it was her name on the headline. Her phone kept buzzing. Advocacy groups, journalists, elected officials wanting to express support and low-key hoping she'd mention them when the press tour started. She stayed quiet for now, but the city couldn't. Lieutenant Harris held a press conference at noon, tight-faced, careful with his words. We acknowledge the incident that occurred yesterday involving Miss Danielle Prescott and 2 officers from our department. While the officers responded to what they believed was a credible call, the situation was not handled with the discretion and professionalism we expect. We have launched a full internal investigation and both officers involved have been placed on administrative leave. Reporters pressed him. Was it racial profiling? Will the city apologize? Has General Prescott made any demands? Harris deflected. We're reviewing the bodycam footage and taking all appropriate steps, but by then, the public had already decided, and so had General Prescott. At exactly 4 p.m., he held his own press conference, not in front of a government building, but on his front lawn. No podium, no flags, just him, Danielle at his side, and a wall of cameras. He didn't read from a script, he didn't need to. My wife sat on a bench, she didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice, she didn't break a single law. She was handcuffed because someone didn't like how she looked in their neighborhood. That's it. He glanced at Danielle, and the only reason she was uncuffed was because of my rank, my title, my uniform. That's not justice, that's just politics. The system didn't protect her, I did. And I shouldn't have had to. The reporters were still, some nodded, others just stared. But let me be clear, he added, we're not suing for money, we're not asking for apologies behind closed doors. We want policy change, we want public accountability, and we want training that actually sticks, not a checkbox on a form. Danielle stepped forward then, just a step. I've worked hard my whole life, I pay taxes, I raise children, I run a healthcare clinic, but when I sat on that bench, none of that mattered to them. I was just a problem. She didn't cry, she didn't raise her voice. I don't want this to be about how powerful my husband is, I want it to be about how powerless people feel when this happens to them, without a title, without a camera, without a voice. That night, the clip of her words became the new headline, and while news shows debated it and tweets flew back and forth, the Carmel Police Department quietly updated their website with a new page, Community Incident Review and Bias Training Initiative. But people weren't impressed because they'd seen that before, too. But what nobody had seen, not yet, was what Danielle had written the night before, and by morning, it would be the only thing anyone could talk about. At 7:41 a.m., Danielle clicked post. No team of editors, no stylists, just her iPhone, her thoughts, and a heart that hadn't stopped racing since yesterday. The caption was short, here's what I needed to say in my own words. Below it was a 2-minute video, no music, no graphics, just Danielle seated at her kitchen table, sunlight pouring in from the window behind her. She looked directly into the camera. You know what hurts the most? She began. It's not the cuffs, it's not the embarrassment, it's the fact that nobody asked me what I was doing before they judged why I was doing it. Her voice was steady, no anger, just truth. I sat on a bench in a quiet neighborhood and suddenly I became someone to fear, not because I did anything, not because I said anything, but because I wasn't supposed to be there. And the person who called, she didn't say anything to me, she just called the police like I was trash to be cleaned up. Danielle paused, let that sink. They didn't see a woman, they didn't see a mom or a professional or a wife, they saw a problem, and the minute I opened my mouth to defend myself, I became non-compliant, I became a risk, a box they could check to justify the way they handled me. Her eyes didn't waver. I didn't get dignity until my husband showed up in a uniform, until power walked up behind me. But what about the women who don't have that? What about the women who get cuffed, dragged, arrested, humiliated with no general walking in behind them? She leaned slightly closer. I'm not special, and I shouldn't have to be treated like a human being. The video ended with 10 seconds of silence, just her face, just her eyes, then it faded to black. By noon, the clip had passed 5 million views. Comments poured in, not just from supporters, but from women, black women, brown women, Asian women, white women. His stories stacked up in the replies like bricks in a wall, stories of being followed, doubted, silenced, pushed aside, and then came the ripple Danielle hadn't expected. A woman, anonymous profile, but verified badge, posted a short, shaky clip of a quiet street, just a tree, a bench, and a nervous voice. I think I was the one who called that day. I didn't realize, I swear I didn't mean for it to go like that. I was scared, and I didn't even know what I was scared of. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Danielle didn't respond publicly. She didn't have to. The world was already having the conversation. General Prescott received a formal letter from the city the next day requesting a private meeting with the mayor and police chief. He declined. Instead, he wrote back, "My wife has already said what needed to be said. The question now is whether you're going to listen." Danielle returned to work the following week. She brought cookies for the office. She led a strategy meeting. She laughed at someone's bad joke, but the people around her looked at her differently now, not with pity, but with recognition. The woman who got handcuffed and stood up anyway, the woman who said the quiet part out loud, the woman who turned a bench into a battleground and never raised her voice. And as for the officers, one resigned quietly, the other was reassigned to desk duty pending review. The city promised reform, the public stayed skeptical, but Danielle, she didn't wait for anyone's approval because she knew now what so many already knew: respect shouldn't depend on who walks in behind you, it should begin the moment you sit down. We don't always get to control how we're seen, but we do get to control how we stand, even when we're sitting. If this story moved you, say something, share it, talk about it, speak up when it's uncomfortable, because silence is easy, and that's why it's dangerous. Brought to you by Dark Stories.